Can I preface something?
Mm-hmm.
Today has been a very tough day, a very challenging day. And somebody even said that I wasn't I wasn't being very yoga. I don't know if it was like a major trigger, but it kind of triggered me a little bit. And I'm trying to figure out that trigger. I think it's because it's like, I don't know, I feel like I need to dispel some myths about what yoga is. And
Yes.
you saying that something isn't yoga, that's what's not yoga.
Yeah.
Yoga it's a practice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not something that you just do once. It's not just the body postures. It's not just pranayama, the breathing. It's not going to the yoga studio. It's not, like
Mm-hmm.
there are things that I can honestly say that's not yoga. But the main thing that is not yoga is one person telling another person when they are and are not practicing yoga. Because
Mm-hmm.
what yoga means is union with the self. And I'm Brianna. I consider myself a development consultant. I studied international affairs and then got a master's in international development cooperation. So that's more of just like helping countries, which led to business development. And with yoga, I've been able to take it into self-development. I am a certified yoga instructor. My first certification was 200 hours of vinyasa in New York City. That was after 4 years of practicing yoga. And also, like, I never thought that I could be a yoga teacher. Somebody once told me, "Oh, I could see you being a yoga teacher." I was like, they're always so like graceful and peaceful and calm. I had my own assumptions about what a yoga teacher is. And I've also done other yoga certifications. So I did baby yoga just because,
Oh,
like, start them young. The
yes.
earlier you start yoga, the better. That's the way that we're actually going to achieve world peace. Like if
Mm-hmm.
kids start doing yoga, like that's my belief. And then I did stillness touch, which is actually still kind of considered yoga, which is craniosacral touch.
Okay.
So it is energetic healing practice, I guess you can say, with two people. And then I also did another 200 hours of Sumit's yoga. And that's actually the first yoga studio that I ever practiced at. I do another 90 hours or 100 hours of science of self. So, and I really want to highlight that one. Yeah. Yeah. With Rose Aaron, she's in New York City and she is a walking force field, because of all the yoga that she practices. And if you want to look her up, and it's combining Eastern medicine and philosophy of the meridians, which are like energetic channels through the body. And she came up with a sequence that helps you just open up all of those pathways and target certain areas. And a lot of the times, like our emotions manifest into physical pain.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to get rid of that emotional pain, sometimes you do have to do certain physical things. Our arm hurts and you really think, no, it's because I broke it 5 years ago. It's not really, that's why it hurts. It hurts because of the trauma that's associated with that injury in your brain. We practice yoga so that one day we can all live in peace. And how do we do that? By living in peace by ourselves. So it all starts with the self. What is the self? I think that's something that we really have to dig into, because there's always like self-care and this and that. And I've gone through a few hundred hours of teacher training. And some of the biggest takeaways and what you always start with fundamentally is, what is the self?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to describe because a lot of people think myself, the
Mm-hmm.
word myself altogether, myself. But in yoga, really, it's self with the capital S, which means the divine in you, your soul. In yoga, we do believe that we are all also part of one self.
Mm-hmm.
We're all collective consciousness. Everybody that you meet is a mirror for yourself. And that's why we say namaste. The divine in me honors the divine light in you. If you cut your arm off, are you still yourself? Yes. If you are in the hospital and you lose all your limbs, but your heart is still breathing and your brain is there, are you still yourself?
Yeah.
So yourself isn't just your body.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we believe that the body is a container for the self. So there's different ways to practice yoga and to practice mindfulness and meditation. Also, I come from like the Ashtanga 8-limbed yoga. Asana, the body postures, definitely part of yoga. When you go to the yoga studio, you work your body out, you're sweating, you're taking care of the actual physical body. Yes, of course, that's yoga. But there's so many other ways to practice yoga. And actually the first two, the yamas and niyamas, are observances, basically, that you can do alone in your room. It's all about that connection that you have with yourself that will in turn help you with your relationships with others. There came a time in my life when I'm like, no, I could be happier. And like these feelings that I have or these situations that I'm always in, like this doesn't make me happy. So how can I be happy? That's when I started practicing or just going to a yoga studio, hot yoga studio. And I didn't expect it to be such a transformational experience. I first started going because I thought, okay, the reason that I'm happy is because I gained a lot of weight because of my breakup. You know, I've been depressed and I've been eating whatever I want. And so I'm not feeling good in my body. So I need to start working out. This room is basically a sauna and I'm doing cardio and strength training. Of course, I'm going to be losing weight really quickly. So then I'd say it was probably my third or fifth class when then I was crying. And I'm like, whoa, why am I crying? And that's when I started to really see that my body was so much more. I've always been pretty spiritual. I've always believed that there was a God. I always do think that I am protected. Like I do feel like I have a lot of angels because there's a lot of things that I've done in my past that I'm like, oh geez, how am I still alive? And it's like, that's a miracle, you know? So it's like, for some reason, I'm here. I'm here on this earth. And yoga, practicing asana, the body postures, is what eventually led me into the larger world of yoga philosophy and learning about the history and importantly learning the vocabulary, because there's a lot of vocabulary in Sanskrit, for example, that explains certain things and feelings and thoughts that I've had ever since I was a child, but I didn't have the vocabulary to express it because it's not in our Western vocabulary. I grew up bilingual Spanish and English, and still there were no words to describe certain feelings and experiences. So I'm very thankful to be here today with you. Even though that it's a tough day, because it only shows more of why I need to keep on practicing yoga, why I need to keep on sharing yoga, why I need to, you know, share my voice and share my experience. And hopefully it intrigues people to learn more about themselves. And I know you have some questions, so we can get into it.
I love that. Yeah, thank you for sharing a little bit about like what brought you into yoga. I think that was one of my questions, was kind of like what initially drew you to it. My background with yoga is my mom is a yoga teacher. And so growing up when I was a kid, she taught yoga to these like seniors at a college. They would just meet at the college and I would go and do yoga with them. And so like literally ever since I was a child, I've been doing yoga. Now, I guess I just kind of like, I do kind of my own yoga practice and then sometimes I'll go to classes, but I've never dove into the yoga world and what's behind that. One thing that I would love for you to touch more on, I feel like you've already kind of touched a little bit, but how your yoga practice you're a yoga teacher, so you can address the teaching side or just your own personal yoga practice, how that plays a role in self-love and self-respect and developing these things.
It's always a conversation in your mind when you're in any sort of workout class, I think, but then especially yoga and whenever you're new. Like I remember always thinking I'm not flexible enough, or I could never do yoga, or I'm not skinny enough, because we always had like some sort of idea of what yoga could be, and I didn't look like that. But at one point I didn't care. I still kept on going. And you know, when you're on your mat, it's just you and your mat. So how it played a role in my self-love journey is being able to then notice, like, what was I saying to myself when I couldn't get into a certain pose, or when, you know, when it was really difficult for me, or I thought that I could get it, or I did it one day, why can't I do it today? Like it's always kind of like negative self-talk, I think, especially at the beginning, even when you try something new. But then the more that I practiced, I noticed that, well, one, yes, I learned how to do it, But then when something messed up, I was a lot more forgiving with myself.
Mm.
And I knew like it's going to be different. And I think the thing that played the biggest role in how I practice, another way of practicing yoga every single day for me, part of the foundational yoga practices is ahimsa, which is non-harming of others. And that's the number one rule, actually, of yoga, if there are rules. Like it's the one thing of like, just do not harm yourself, and do not harm others. Do not harm others, obviously. And then also do not harm yourself, because by harming yourself, you harm others, because that in this, like, we're all connected anyways. So, okay, going back to my Mexican roots, have always been such a big meat eater. Carne asadas, which are, you know, big Mexican barbecues with skirt steak and a whole bunch of roasted everything and chicken and hot dogs and hamburgers. Like if you go to a Mexican barbecue or carne asada, it's not just grilled meat, it's hot dog, burgers, ribs, like you get all the meats. So long story short, I grew up a huge meat eater, and that's even kind of something that I was known for. Cows have always been my favorite animal, and I used to say cows are my favorite animal. I love to see them, look at them, and I love to eat them. I had no shame in saying that. Like that was my line. And then after 2 years of practicing yoga, so that's when I really found a deep respect for myself, that then helped me have a deeper respect for other human beings and their divinity. Like it's something, you know, you practice, but it got to the point where I couldn't make a different distinction between me and someone else, another human, and I couldn't make a distinction, and I still can't, between a human and another animal. That's a pretty controversial thing, and maybe not everybody agrees with it. Not all yogis are vegetarians or vegans, but for me in my personal practice, I noticed that I was like, oh my gosh, if I wouldn't eat a human, how could I eat an animal? If I wouldn't eat a dog, if I wouldn't eat a cat, why am I eating a pig or a cow? Like, what is the difference between these animals? Everybody has a unique practice, and everybody has a different journey. And it's always a self-love journey that always ends up into love. Love is the main thing about yoga, actually. I want to say, like, that union with the self leads to love. I loved myself so much that I'm like, I'm not going to continue doing this thing that doesn't make me feel good. It's also, I always give myself the choice. That's another thing. Like, we always have the choice. It's not that it's something that I'm saying, no, I'm now a vegetarian because that's my identity. Every time that I see a menu, I still have the choice, because of free will, to eat whatever I want. And I give myself that permission, but it's my choice not to.
Yeah. I like that you brought that up, because I think possibly some people that have not explored a journey with yoga, or a personal journey with yoga yet, that could be a little bit overwhelming of an idea. I think that that's one of the most beautiful pieces of yoga, is it's so inclusive and so welcoming. And even if you're just being really on a basic level, like when you go to a yoga class, there's all different types of people, right? Like there's people that are super flexible and that I get like a little bit intimidated by sometimes. And then there's people that like can't even touch their toes. And it's like, where are you today? And where do you want to meet yourself? So that would be probably my last question, is to dive into, if someone does not have a ton of experience with yoga and wants to begin this yoga journey, where would you start? And what are some things that you definitely want people to be aware of? Like, you have the choice, you always have the choice, some like things along that line.
The easiest way to start is with breathing. Of the 8 limbs of yoga, there is asana, which is its own limb, its own branch, its own practice, basically, that you can go into depth. But another one, and equally as important, is pranayama. So only using your breath as a yoga practice. So if you really, really, really wanted to start your yoga practice and you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable about like even showing up anywhere, only focusing on your breathing. And there's different breathing practices that you can do. You can look them up. The easiest one is to, like right now, I'll ask you, Hannah, to take a deep breath in. Take a deep breath in. Okay. See how your shoulders like went up a little bit and like you
Mm.
constricted yourself a little bit? So a different breathing practice, like that works, right? And that's like what we normally do. But if you put your hands on your belly and then you breathe in, and instead of trying to breathe in up here, try to push your belly out with your hands, with your breath. And then breathing out, and then as you're exhaling, bringing your belly button close to your spine, moving your hands in, and then again, breathing in to your hands, and then breathing out and relaxing your shoulders as much as possible. That's already switching up your normal breathing pattern. It's allowing more oxygen into your body. It's allowing you to then switch your state of mind too. Like if you do that for 5 minutes, just that, like just only focus on like, how am I breathing? Where am I breathing into? So that's one thing. If you are going into the yoga studio, what I always tell students at the beginning of any class, no matter how we start, it's that it's not what it looks like, it's what it feels like. And you'll hear other teachers say that too, especially when you're new and when you don't know the sequences and you don't know the vocabulary, you don't know how to transition from one to another movement if the teacher isn't like explaining it step by step. Like you may feel a little bit awkward doing it because you're like, whoa, how did they get into that? And it's going to be natural for you to look at other people and see what's going on. I do it still. I go to yoga studios all over the world. Sometimes I take yoga classes in Spanish and Italian, and I don't know all the vocabulary because it's way different than English. And I still have to, and even in English classes, like it's you still always kind of look around to see like, wait, is it the left hand, is it the right hand, is it the foot, like where does that go? So it's fine, it's totally fine to look around, but eventually give yourself enough space to trust yourself to just go for it, to do it, to not be focusing really on other people, but what are you feeling on your mat? Because like I said, that is when you're practicing yoga, not when you get the right pose and get into the right posture and make it look like everybody else. It's when you're in a posture and you're feeling it. You feel the difference between the expansiveness of a warrior two. You feel like, wow, I'm really stretching and I feel so expansive. Or when you're saying like an eagle pose, which is when you cross your legs and you cross your arms, and it's all about the constriction. It's the constriction, the release. Once you start to feel how the poses are supposed to feel spiritually, that's when you're really practicing yoga. That's that little time that you have with yourself and can be kinder to yourself, can be more, inquisitive and learn about yourself. Because I think a lot about self-love is getting to know yourself, and yoga is a tool for you to get to know yourself.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I agree. And that's actually like the perfect way to wrap up, because that's a lot of what we've been talking about with my other collaborations. And I love the inquisitiveness. And that's how I've kind of been like verbalizing it, is like self-love. It's like lovingly just being aware, or like lovingly questioning, or lovingly just being mindful, paying attention to in yoga, like, oh yeah, my left hamstring is really tight, or like this pose on this side of my body feels so much different. And instead of judging it, and or like you said, like last week I was able to do this pose, like instead of being playing like a comparison, just accepting like, this is where I am today. It's just, I think I always equate it with like a gentle acceptance, like a loving acceptance. And I think that is what at the root of what self-love is. So that was beautiful.
A thing I'd also like to add too, which is another tool, probably more in cognitive behavioral therapy than yoga, but it also works in yoga and translates really well, is challenging your assumptions. I think assumptions and judgment go hand in hand.
Yeah. And judgment on other people, but also on ourselves.
Once you practice a lot, you'll start to see the assumptions of the judgment that you have of yourself. And then you'll maybe judge somebody else and then be like, oh wait, but that's actually what I think about me. And then you'll start to like realize the mirror thing. And then yeah, it's all a journey. It's all a path.
Well, thank you for coming. Thanks for chatting. You shared like so much great information, so many nuggets, so many gems. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you kind of opening up, even though it was a tough day, but